Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Erika Heald, your content chat host. And today we have fresh from Content Marketing World in San Diego, Nancy Harhut, who gave probably the most talked about session other than the keynotes. Because the keynotes are pretty juicy, but as far as breakout sessions, so many people were talking about Nancy's session on using behavioral psychology in content marketing. And I'm not surprised because I've seen Nancy speak on this topic previously, and she just has so many great real life examples that take something that could be, in other hands, a dry academic topic and turns it into lots of awesome aha moments, or if you're like me, lots of awesome notes in your notebook. No matter how many times I hear her, that's how things always are for me. So Nancy, thank you so much for joining Content Chat today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm just delighted to be here and to chat with you. So it's going to be awesome.
Well, for people who don't know you, can you just give us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how your book came into being?
Sure, sure. My name is Nancy Harhut, and I am the co-founder and chief creative officer of HBT Marketing. HBT stands for Human Behavior Triggers, and at the agency, what we do is we live at the intersection of marketing best practices and behavioral science. And when I say behavioral science, what I'm really talking about is the study of why people do what they do, and then from a marketer's perspective, how can we increase the chances that they do what we want them to do? And I kind of grew up in this business, in the marketing business, that is, as a copywriter, and worked my way up through the ranks, and eventually, was a associate creative director someplace. And I think my creative director at the time gave me a book to read. It was Robert Cialdini's Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. And that just sent me down the rabbit hole of behavioral science and behavioral psychology and decision science, and just, different ways that we can influence people's behaviors to increase the likelihood they do what we want them to do, but to do it in a win-win way, so that our customers and prospects benefit and our businesses benefit. So that's what I do. Couple of years ago, I actually wrote the book Using Behavioral Science in Marketing. Kogan Page published it. They invited me to write the book when they saw a presentation that I was going to be doing at South by Southwest. So I wrote the book and kind of poured everything I could think of, everything that I've found has worked over the years, into that book, so that people would have a hands-on handbook of how to use behavioral science and marketing, how to begin to test and apply these principles, and increase the likelihood that they get the response they're looking for. So in a rather large nutshell, that's me.
I love it. And I have to say, having read the book, I would have loved to have had something like that in, some of my college classes where it is, really practical because I think so frequently a lot of the things we learn in school about marketing, they're theoretical. They're big lofty things that unless you work for a big lofty company, you don't even necessarily get to put into practice. But every day, if you're creating content, you have choices that you can make. You're choosing about how you're creating, what kind of content you're creating for your audience. Is it written? Is it audio? Is it visual? And you're thinking about all these things that go into making the content work. And one of the things that you said that always, stuck with me is, our brain wants decision making shortcuts all day, every day. All we're doing is making decisions. So when it sees a really delicious looking shortcut, it takes it. So I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about that in the context of content marketing.
Sure, sure. And thanks again for the kind words about my book. Every once in a while, I'll hear from somebody either here or abroad who says that they teach and they're using it in their college classes, and it just, like, I don't know, kind of
That's
lights
so
me up. I'm like,
awesome.
wow, that's so cool. Um, so yes, so yeah. And what was the question again? No, so all right. So thank you for the kind words about the book. And so yeah, we as humans, we love decision making shortcuts. We're hardwired to rely on them, and the reason is we can't possibly weigh every bit of information before we make a decision, or we just never get around to making any, right? And so over the ages, humans have developed these decision making shortcuts, these decision defaults. And what we do is we cruise along through life on autopilot, we encounter a certain situation, and we just default to these hardwired behaviors, giving the matter at hand little, if any, thought. What this allows us to do as people is it allows us to conserve mental energy, right? If we tried to weigh every bit of information, we just wouldn't get around to making any decisions. We'd be so bogged down, we just wouldn't be able to get anything done. And so behavioral scientists say that up to 95% of purchase decision making takes place in the subconscious mind. And what's interesting is if you ask somebody why they did what they did, why they bought something, why they didn't buy something, why they liked something, why they didn't like something, they will give you a legitimate answer. They'll point to something that makes a lot of sense and say, oh, well, that's why I did it, or that's why I didn't do it. But the truth is, very often there's more to the story. Very often there are other factors at play that influence people's decisions, and they're not even aware of them. So, they're cruising along on autopilot, they make a decision. If nobody asks them about it, great. But if someone happens to then say, well, why? Why did you do that, Erica? Why did you buy that? Why didn't you buy this one? Then you kind of like snap into your snap to kind of like re-enter reality, and you'd be like, oh, well, I did it. And you would point to something really, sensible, legitimate, and certainly that was part of it, but it likely wasn't the thing. And that's what's so cool about these decision-making shortcuts, because we know that the human brain craves them. We know that people rely on them. We know that often they're not aware of it. And as marketers, if we can start to get out ahead of that and say, well, all right, since this is happening, what's the best way for me to use that to inform my content? How can I use some of these decision-making shortcuts to make sure that people are more interested in my content, more likely to pay attention to it, that they're more likely to understand it? Because if they don't understand it, what's going to happen? They just immediately say, this is too complicated. I have plenty of other choices. I'm going to go find someone else, right? I'll go to another website. I'll go to another blog. I'll find something else. So we want to make sure that people notice. We want to make sure that they understand. We want to make sure that people remember what it is that we're saying, the information about our products and services. And then, of course, the granddaddy is we want to make sure that they act on it. And there are ways that behavioral science will help content marketers hit all four of those marks. And that's why using behavioral science in marketing is so valuable to marketers today.
And what I think is really the tricky part of all this, of course, is as Carl notes here, is, we all like to think that we're making those rational decisions. So, our content has to have all of that rational decision-making stuff in there too. But it's got to have more than that, because you can have all of the great rational arguments for why you're the best product, you have the best price, and you should buy it now. But if you don't have that little extra something, you're not going to break through the noise. So maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, no, Carl is absolutely right about that. The truth is we make decisions. People make decisions for emotional reasons. And this is true in B2C and in B2B. We make decisions for emotional reasons, and then we justify those decisions with rational reasons. So what that means, as Carl is pointing out, is that we need to have both the rational and the emotional, components to our sales messages, to our content marketing, because they both work together. We may make the decision for emotional reasons, but then we quickly point to those rational reasons to justify our decision to ourselves and to other people. So we want that nice mix. But we also, as marketers, we want to be aware of the fact that that even though we think people are making these well thought out, well considered decisions, it's very often not the case. And we need to resist the urge to just pummel people with the facts and the speeds and the feeds and all the technical information that we feel people need in order to make a decision, because while that helps, it's not really what's driving them. We really need to think about that higher level emotional need that's going to be answered when they decide to buy our product or to subscribe to our service. So it's really important for us as marketers to put ourselves in the mindset of our customers and to, again, look at everything through this lens of decision-making shortcuts, this lens of, people aren't always making the most well-considered, well-thought-out decisions.
Well, it's interesting because today, we send out our content chat bulletin on every other Monday, and we do it in advance of having the chat go live. So we promote what we're talking about. And it was funny because today I actually had someone unsubscribe who had not opened any of the email newsletters. And it's because I definitely led with emotion in my subject line, which was, have you found your happy place in the content community? And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think that person had not. And my email provoked that very strong, immediate unsubscribe action from somebody who had not even opened any of the newsletters since they'd been subscribed.
Wow. Well, I feel for you, because it's, it's always sad to see someone unsubscribe. But I will tell you this, uh, Outcome Media, Outcome Media, right? It's Jay Schwedelson's company, subjectline.com and World Data. He recently published a stat that I thought was very interesting. He said, as we come into the end of the year, we're going to see two things happen. We're going to see unsubscribes go way up. And the reason, we shouldn't take it personally. The reason is some of these people are just kind of, preparing for the next year. And they're like, I never opened these. I'm going to clear out my inbox. My needs and my interests have changed. And so as a result, I'm going to unsubscribe. But the flip side also happens as we get closer to the beginning of the new year. People start to sign up for and re-engage with topics that are interesting to them, or with brands that they feel are going to be beneficial. So this person who unsubscribed may be just an example of that. You know what? It's the end of the year. I'm cleaning out my inbox. As Jay points out, it's fine that they unsubscribed. They probably were never really going to be a loyal, listener or audience member, and it's okay. Let them go off and do their thing. Maybe they'll find their way back when circumstances change. And if not, it's okay. Let them go. And I always thought that was very good advice. Although it still pains me that it was the content chat that we're having that prompted the unsubscribe. That's going to bother me all night now.
Well, Carmen says that this is her happy place, so that makes me feel great. Well, and you're right, Nancy. I mean, I think that we always think that about evoking an emotion as being, a positive thing, of getting them to take action in the way that we like. But sometimes people are going to take the action of opting out or unsubscribing. And that's actually really good, because you don't want to have a list with low open rates and low engagement. You want to have that highly engaged audience that you've gotten to know and you know how to reach. So even sometimes if that, if those subject lines or that emotional response is the, to heck with you, I don't want you in my inbox anymore, that's a good thing.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. We don't, it's going to hurt our deliverability if we're sending out all of these, emails or e-newsletters and people aren't engaging with them. So we do want to kind of weed out, I should say, people who, really don't want to be around anymore. Although some people just kind of, I don't know, the inertia sets in and they just don't get around to doing things. And when you ping them and say, hey, is this it? Is this goodbye? We're about to remove you from our list. Some people actually react against that and say, oh, no, don't take me off. No, I'm almost like, gee, I'm sorry. I'll be better. Please don't get rid of me, And so sometimes kind of firing that warning shot over the bow, saying, hey, listen, you haven't really been opening, you haven't really been engaging, we're about to remove you. For some people it's like, sure, that's great, but other people are going to be like, no, please don't. So it's a nice way to re-engage people by flagging the behavior, or the lack of behavior, I should say, and saying to them, we're gonna take you off the list. Some people put themselves on that list. They want to be on that list. They don't want to lose it, and it's a little warning to get them to engage. And so that's great. That works for us all too. And for the people who, like, as we said, have moved on mentally, now they can move on, off of our list as well.
Exactly. Well, I know one of the things that can come into play with email in particular is, we get so many emails, but you actually kind of have to me, a really good thing that people can apply, which is the von Restorff effect. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that, and then talk about how that applies to email, because I think, we all get hundreds of emails each day across multiple email accounts. If you're like most of us, what's one way that you can apply behavioral science to actually be that email that somebody opens when they're just being plagued with emails?
Plagued, a terrible word, but it's true. We are plagued or inundated with them, and so as marketers, we're like, constantly trying to figure out, well, what is it that we can do that will get someone to connect with us and decide to open the email. And, you know, sometimes it's that emotional approach. Sometimes it's using exclusivity, making people feel special. And sometimes, as you say, it's tapping into what behavioral scientists call the von Restorff effect. And the von Restorff effect is this idea that people notice and remember things that stand out from their surroundings, things that are different from their surroundings. And this is something that's been hardwired in humans for ages and ages and ages. It goes probably back to our caveman days, right? We'd get up in the morning, stick our head out of the cave, we'd scan the horizon, and if everything looked the way it did the day before, that was a good thing. But if something were different, if something had been introduced to the environment or removed from the environment, that could pose a threat. And in those days, it could be a very real life or death threat. All these years later, we're still hardwired to notice things that are different. And so from an email perspective, you know, one of the first things we look at is the subject line. We look at the sender, we look at the subject line. And there are things that we can do to our subject lines to make them different from most of the other subject lines that are going to show up in that inbox. So one thing that we can do is we can enclose the first word or two of our subject line in brackets or parentheses. And World Data finds you can get a 28% lift in opening rates when you do that. And of course, the reason is most marketers aren't doing that. If every marketer were, well, they'd just all blend in, right? But because most marketers aren't, the subject line that has the brackets or the parentheses stands out a little bit. Same thing with emojis. They're finding that you can get, World Data is finding that you can get 20 and 30% increases in opening rates, B2C and B2B, using an emoji. It could be an hourglass. It could be a little calendar page, depending on what your content is. And of course, that's part of it. You want to match, the emoji you choose to the content you're delivering. But emojis stand out. And again, if everyone in the inbox were using an emoji, they'd cancel each other out. But as long as not a lot of people are, it makes the case for yours to stand out. If you don't want to go the emoji route, you can use what we call special characters. So it could be like the backslash, it could be an asterisk, it could be an exclamation point, but just some of the characters that are on the keyboard. It could be the little caret thing, right? Again, it's going to stand out. If your email is your email subject line is starting that way, it's going to look different than all the others. All capping a word. We used to think, oh, we dare not all cap words. It's going to make it seem like we're shouting at our customers. And we certainly don't want to all cap everything. But research shows that if we all cap fewer than 50% of the words in a subject line, we can actually get a 21% lift in opening rates. And again, it's the same idea. You're scanning that inbox, and what's going to stand out? It's going to be the thing that's different than everything else. And in this case, it's that subject line that has an all capped word. So what we want to do is, we want to do that, but we also want to use it strategically. We want to all cap a word that's going to be particularly meaningful. Maybe the word is new. Maybe it's the phrase is last chance, or the word is final, or the word is you. You is what I call an eye magnet word. It attracts the human eye like a magnet. We're all interested in ourselves. So when we see the word you, we go to it. So so there are definitely things that we can do, whether it's the brackets, whether it's the special characters, whether it's the emojis, whether it's all capping a word, using numbers in subject lines, but making sure that we use the numerals and we don't spell out the word. That's another great way to activate the von Restorff effect, because a numeral will stand out in a sea of letters, right? All the subject lines are letters, right? They're words. And if you see a 7 as opposed to SEVEN, that digit, that number 7 is going to jump out. You can get I took some notes here, 16% increase in opening rates if you start, your subject line with a numeral. Exaggerated spellings will actually get you an 18% increase if you use them. So, maybe you're going to say, save this week only. You could exaggerate save, SAAAAAVVVVVE, but exaggerated spellings because they're unusual. So anytime we can do something that's going to be just a little different than what all of our competitors are doing, that's going to help us stand out in the inbox, attract attention, and if people pay attention to something, they likely follow that attention with action, and that's what we want. So those are a handful of ways that we can use the von Restorff effect in our subject lines. If we're doing social posts, we want to think about the pictures, the imagery that we use. I saw something from a bank recently, and it was a picture of a person. or at least I think it was supposed to be, because it was a torso with a suit and the person was doing this, but there was no head coming out of the shirt collar and there was no hands coming out of the shirt sleeves. So a little different than most of the pictures of people you see in social media, right? This one was headless and handless. You pay attention to it because it's different, right? So anything we can do with our imagery that makes us a little bit different than what our competition is doing or what everyone else in the feed is doing, because really our competition is anybody else that's, that's trying to talk to the same people we're trying to talk to. Anytime we can do something that makes us different, that makes us stand out, is going to work in our favor.
And I'll say with your example about social media, frequently we'll see folks on threads who have, a question where they're looking for like feedback or recommendation or resources. And they'll say, a cat picture for tax. And then they'll have an adorable picture of their cat or of their dog. And it works because they'll be talking about some like serious topic, even a business topic. But by putting in the tax of that image that's not what you would expect to go with it, it grabs eyeballs and people, repay the smile, that they get on their face by reading the post and responding to it. So as long as you're not doing it all the time, I think there are kind of a lot of ways you can break out of your mold while still staying true to your brand.
Yeah, and and that's a case too where they're acknowledging what they're doing. So it's not like a bait and switch kind of a thing. They're kind of being upfront about it. But as you say, it pulls you in because you're maybe not seeing a lot of these cat pictures or whatever it is, and so you're pulled in, and then a little bit of reciprocity. It's like, oh, you gave me a smile, you gave me something that I enjoyed looking at, so in return I will read your content. Kind of a reciprocity or a tit for tat kind of a relationship, or exchange, I should say. So, so yeah, no, that's the other thing is when we're trying to choose imagery for social post, faces that are making eye contact can work very, very well. And that's, again, something that goes way back to our ancient ancestors, where if we encountered a stranger, we would have to quickly decide friend or foe.
Yep.
And the way we would do that is we'd look them in the face, we'd look them in the eye. And all these years later, we're still drawn to other people's faces. We're hardwired to look at other people's faces. So, every once in a while I'll, be scrolling through my feed and I'll see an image and it'll be somebody, looking down at their keyboard or looking off to the side. And the problem with that is we follow eye contact. So if I'm not looking out at you, I'm going to follow where your eyes go. And if your eyes are looking down, it's going to take me right off the post. Or if they're, looking off to the side, it's going to take me right off the post. So we need to think about this as marketers and strategically use eye gaze to either attract people or to direct them to what we want people to look at, whether it's our offer, our price, or our headline, or some bit of information. But strategically using that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny, Erica, these seem like relatively small things, but they all add up and they can make a difference.
100%. And I can tell you so many times I've seen drafts of like landing pages where the image does distract you and keeps people from ever getting back over to like the call to action. Like they'll have an image over here that is going that way. And so you see that headline and you look over and then you're gone off that page. And you just look at that and you know that no one is ever going to fill out the form on the page. So it's nice to actually, know that you can turn to behavioral science to talk about, why that is. Because some of these things, you just have that gut feeling, especially if you've had even a couple of psychology classes. But it's, excuse me, it's wonderful to know that you can actually use that as your reason. And I think, everybody has an opinion about content. Everyone thinks they're a writer or at least an editor of other people's content. So it's always nice when you can, actually in a substantiated way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We all have our own opinions, and being able to point to an independent test, an independent authority, a researcher, an academic, someone who really looked into this and can explain the reason why certainly helps. And then, I always say to my clients, though, listen, I have my opinion, you have your opinion. Mine might be a little bit better informed, but we won't go there. No, I have my opinion, you have your opinion. But what I say to them is, we can always test. right? Because
Exactly.
not every test turns out the way we think it will. We always learn something from a test. The test is always beneficial. We always learn something from it, but it doesn't always confirm what we think. Sometimes we have a hypothesis, we test it, and it turns out the market proves us wrong. So there might be times when, not making eye contact for whatever reason is going to work for somebody. So, certainly test it. But what I like to do is I like to say to people, the behavioral science principles that you can read about in my book, or that you can, discover in other places, they give you a leg up on your testing, so that you're going to be testing from a more informed perspective. You're more likely to accumulate some quick, easy wins than if you're just starting from kind of ground zero. But there's no one thing that works all the time for all the people. But there are certain things that often work, and those are the things that we want to start to incorporate into the development of our content.
Well, before we move on, I have to share these two comments. So Carl points out that, he's read that we can deliberately use typos to stand out. And Carmen fired back that that's where she draws the line from an ethical standpoint. So speaking of having differing opinions, but that is, a typo. People love seeing other people being wrong on the internet. And then they'll look through and they'll want to tell you on social media that you had a typo or hit reply. So sometimes, that is a way to trick people, or like those, oops, we made a mistake, updated subject lines and emails. I get so many of those.
They're like rubbernecking on the highway, right? You're driving along and there's an accident in the other lane, and we just can't help ourselves. We have to slow down and look to see what we can see. And you get one of those emails that says, oops, we made a mistake. You might not have read the first email that went out, could have cared less about it, right? Couldn't have cared less about it. And then you get the mistake and oh my gosh, I got to see what this was. You want to find out who screwed up, how badly did they screw up, what did they do? It's terrible, but it's human nature. We always, we're a little drawn in by somebody else's misfortunes. The funny thing with the typos is, yes, some people are recommending that you use typos just to prove that you're human. And I think you have to be very strategic about how you're going to do that, if you're going to do that. If it's random typos, I really do believe that can reflect poorly on you. And I
Yeah.
have, talked about this at conferences when I say, it's not that people won't forgive you for making a mistake. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But if you, spell something wrong in your marketing communications, it begs the question, where else are you cutting corners? Where else are you
Yeah.
not quality assuring things, And so that's why it's so critical to proofread. That said, I've seen some very interesting and I believe successful applications of using the wrong word or the wrong spelling of a word. We talked about the exaggerated spelling. That's deliberate, right? It was probably not when you look at that, you don't go, oh, that's a typo. They put, all those A's and save. You
Yeah.
realize they did it for a reason. So, you're doing it strategically. I've also seen companies use the wrong word, or brands use the wrong word. There was something I saw from Sears, and it said, it's been a lawn winter, LAWN. It's been a lawn winter. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. It's supposed to be, it's been a long winter. And I'm thinking to myself, was someone doing voice dictation? Did this just get picked up wrong? And then I looked, and it was from the patio department at Sears, and they were selling lawn furniture because, spring was coming. It was like, so there's that moment, as you say, where, people are like, oh, they made a mistake, so you get them, you get their attention. And then there's also that, oh, I get it. And now you're in on the joke and you're primed for the message, right? It's like, oh, lawn, and oh no, lawn furniture and patio, and oh yeah, maybe I could use a few more chairs. Ones I put away last year probably didn't survive the winter all that well. But so I think there are ways to be smart about how we use some of these tactics, so that we don't cross that line that Carmen is drawing. But we do it in a thoughtful way that is actually going to help us with engagement and with kind of fostering that relationship with our audience.
Well, I know another kind of divisive tactic that you've spoken about is rhyming. And I call it divisive because I had a client who was very serious. And, occasionally there would be rhymes and things. And I would get we're very serious people. Rhyming is not very serious. Rhyming is, kind of twee, etc. But guess what? Other people, when I've written things that have rhymes, people get excited by the rhyming. There's something about it just gets them kind of like revved up and then they're paying attention. So I was wondering, what does behavioral science tell us about rhyming?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Behavioral science tells us that not only are rhymes easier to remember, which I think we all would kind of, say, of course, that makes sense. They tell us that not only are rhymes, or behavioral scientists tell us that not only are rhymes easier to remember, but people actually judge rhyming phrases to be more truthful, more accurate than similar phrases that basically say the same thing but that don't rhyme. So you could say woes unite foes, woes unite enemies. Both of those two phrases convey the same information. One of them rhymes, the other one doesn't. In tests, behavioral scientists have found that it's the rhyming phrase that people judge to be the more truthful, the more accurate. And the reason is it's easier for the human brain to process phrases that rhyme. And if something is easier for the brain to process, it feels right. And if something feels right, it's not a big leap to assume that it is right. And that's what opens the door for us in terms of, really kind of harnessing the power of rhyme. Because if people are more likely to believe a phrase that's rhyming, not just remember it, but believe it, that can be a very good thing, right? It makes them more likely to be persuaded by what we have to say, right? If they're going to believe it, they're going to be more likely to act on it. They're going to be persuaded by it. So, I mean, I certainly understand that there are some companies that feel this isn't our brand voice, it's not our tone, it's not our brand personality, and that's probably very true. But it's interesting when you start to look at uh, the categories that have successfully used rhymes. You think about like um, uh, health remedies, right? Alka-Seltzer years ago did plop plop fizz fizz, oh what a relief it is. They're starting to bring it back. I just heard a riff on it the other day when I was watching TV. It's like, oh wow, they're bringing that back. um, Paxlovid, right? The medicine that you take if you've had COVID. Now COVID is kind of a serious thing, right? We're talking
Yeah,
about a health concern, but they used, if it's COVID, Paxlovid.
yeah.
So they worked it.
It
They,
was
they
very
worked it in.
intentional naming.
Yes, absolutely. Not only did they intentionally name it, but then they turned it into their tagline to help you remember it, to help you believe, oh yeah, this could really help me. Um, Gillette, for years they did Gillette, the best a man can get, but they're starting to again bring that back. What are the Pringles? I was going to say the potato chips in the round cylinder. Once you pop, you can't stop. So it's interesting, anything from what something as frivolous as potato chips to something as serious as a medicine. There are ways to use rhyming. So it could be your strap line, your campaign, strap line. It could be your slogan, your tagline. It could be your call to action. Don't delay, register today if it's a webinar that you want someone to sign up for, or a sales meeting you're trying to get them to book, or maybe you're running a contest and the call to action could be, I'm in it to win it, as opposed to simply saying enter me or sign up, right? Which
Yep.
are, default but kind of boring. So, content titles, email subject lines, calls to action, campaign lines, all big opportunities to inject some rhyme and not only increase the memorability, but the believability of your content.
So, so fun. Of course, we would be remiss if we don't talk about, with all of this, some folks are probably thinking to themselves, well, I'm a very skeptical person and I make my own decisions and I like to make an unconventional decision. And the thing is that's also a psychological effect, right? That's autonomy bias. We want to think that we are making our own decisions and forging our own path, but that's actually, again, another kind of psychological bias we have that comes into play when you're looking at content.
It absolutely does. And you're right. Very few of us will say, oh, yes, I'm completely influenced by marketing and advertising. I'm very wishy washy. I don't make up my own mind. I just do what the ad tells me. Like, we're not going to say that. We all like to say, we know why we do what we do. We make up our own mind. We're not influenced by advertising. But, study after study after study has shown that that's not always true. Certainly sometimes it is. I don't want to say that we never put on our thinking caps, that we never do the cost benefit analysis and weigh the pros and cons and really work at coming up with a well thought out, well considered decision. Sometimes we do, but very often, as I mentioned earlier, we cruise along on autopilot, and We just default to these decisions. And your point about autonomy bias is well taken. Humans have this deep-seated desire to feel that we're the ones in charge, that we have some kind of control over ourselves and our environments. A psychologist would call it agency, right? We want agency, and it's very, very deep-seated. We want some kind of control. So simply by giving somebody a choice, you can activate that idea of autonomy, of that idea of control. So in marketing, one of the things that we do is, we like to make things easy for people by whittling down their options and saying, here we go, Erica, I've picked this just for you. I've made it easy for you. You don't have to do all of the research. Like, this is perfect for you. And we think, wow, we're really being helpful. But as marketers, we'd be better off to put a couple of things in front of you. So, we don't want to overwhelm you with choices. But if I came to you and said, based on the survey that you took, or based on our previous interactions, I think these are the two that are going to be best suited for you. You're still in the driver's seat. You still have the opportunity to choose between those two. And behavioral scientists have found that you're more likely to make a choice than if I just put one thing in front of you. If I put that one thing, maybe you feel a little pushed because that's your only option, or maybe you feel like, I don't trust Nancy. I'm going to do some research, right? I don't know. Do I want this? Do I not want this? Nancy says I should take it, but I'm going to ask around. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to see what my friends or colleagues think. And then, we get busy. We don't do the research. We don't talk to people, and the buying moment disappears. But if I put two things in front of you, the question goes from do I or do I not want this to, ooh, which of these two do I want? And it's almost like a foregone conclusion. You're going to choose one of them, right? We've made it very easy because there's context, there's comparison, and the brain likes to take the easy way out. So in the first case, there's only one option. The brain has work to do, right? They've got to do the research. They got to think about it. They got to figure it out. With two things, the comparison is very easy. And the truth is, there's a third option there, which is I want neither. But we rarely go there, right? If there's two things, we right away go to, ooh, which of these two do I want? So, so choice can be a great way to trigger that deep-seated desire for autonomy. And you're absolutely right. It manifests itself in this idea that people say, oh, I don't listen to other people. I'm not influenced by other people. I make my own decisions. Why? Because we love to feel like we're the ones in charge. So anytime we can give people choices, anytime we can use language that reminds people that they're in charge, that we're offering something that's going to put them in control, that's going to give them power, that is like psychological gold, right? People love that. It really appeals to them.
And I had in my notes that you mentioned the BYAF effect, but you are free, or the choice is yours, and this blew me away. I'm going to let you share the stat on this, because that way it's coming from you and not just from my notes.
It's really interesting that the BYAF technique, it stands for but you are free. And what behavioral scientists have found is it's almost counterintuitive. They found that you can tell someone what you want them to do. You can ask them to do it. And then if you follow that request with a phrase such as, but you are free to choose, or the choice is yours, or it's up to you, or it's your call, you can on average double the likelihood that people will do what you're asking them to do. And, from a marketing perspective, you might say, that makes no sense. I've just kind of put my best sales argument in front of somebody. I've got them where I want them. I'm at that call to action. Why on earth would I say, but you know what? The choice is yours. Like I've laid out my argument and I've said, so sign up today, right? Why would I then say, but it's up to you? But it turns out that just reminding people, making it very salient, very top of mind, that they're the ones in control, that they're the ones who are making this decision, that they're not being pushed into it, that that the choice is theirs, actually makes them more receptive to doing what you want them to do. There were a couple of researchers at University of Bordeaux in France, and they went and they hung out at a bus station, and they posed as panhandlers, right? And they would approach people with one of two requests. Sometimes they'd approach people and say, something like, pardon me, do you have some coins for the bus, please? And other times they would say, pardon me, do you have some coins for the bus, please? But the choice is yours. And what they found is when they added that, but the choice is yours at the end of the request for some money, 4 times as many people gave them money, and the average donation was larger. So it was just amazing that just, they're kind of hanging out, pretending to be, panhandling at a bus station. And, just that one little extra sentence saying, but you know what, basically, you can give me some money or you don't have to. It's up to you, is what got them, got more people to do it and got them larger donations. So it's really pretty incredible. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but when you start to peel back the layers of the science, you understand why. It's like, yeah, I'm making it very clear that I'm not forcing people, I'm not pressuring people. In fact, I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm reminding them that it's their call. So pretty fascinating stuff and pretty effective stuff.
And it's really closely related to the labeling as well. Like once you something about giving people, the choice and letting them know that they're free to do whatever they want, they don't have to do one of these great things, but other smart people like them, other, experienced travelers, other, smart professionals, we want to we want to make those words right. We want to live up to the marketer's expectation of us and to show that, well, yes, we are that smart, discerning person and we want to be part of that group. So that was also one of the things that was related that, again, it feels counterintuitive because we want to be like, we're forging our own path and all of these things that are ingrained, but they're at conflict with also wanting to live up to these labels, which I found to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I guess there's like a couple of things there. If you said like other smart people like you, other savvy executives, other smart savers, whatever. So there's a little bit of social proof because it's like, oh, other people are doing this too. But the labeling is what you really want to get at, which is calling somebody a savvy shopper or a savvy saver, and what happens is, even if you hadn't necessarily thought of yourself that way, once you're labeled that way, you start to behave like the other people in that group. And it's very interesting. It's like I guess it's a decision making shortcut, where if you're told that you're a smart shopper, or if you're told that you're a discerning carnivore, whatever, you start to behave that way. There are some limits, of course, to the study. If you label somebody in a way that they find distasteful, that's offensive to them, it's not going to change their opinion. So I mean, I'm thinking about like the current political climate, and if you're if you're of one party and you're labeled as a loyal person of the other party, Democrat, you're a loyal Republican, or Republican, you're a loyal Democrat, that's not going to immediately switch your party affiliation.
Yep.
Just like if you're a dyed-in-the-wool vegetarian and someone says, oh, is a discerning carnivore, you'll love our steaks by the mail program, it's not going to switch you. But if it's a neutral term or an aspirational term, research shows it can really impact your behavior, can impact the decisions that you make. So if you use a term that someone would like to be, thought of, that they'd like to be thought of as a savvy saver, or they'd like other people to think of them as savvy savers, or they aspire to be a savvy saver, and you label them that way, and then say, other savvy savers choose to bank with us, you're much more likely to get them to say, well, maybe I better bank with this particular group. It's really very interesting. Researchers, speaking of the election, researchers in Chicago a number of years ago, not at this election, but a number of years ago, were talking to people about the upcoming election and the candidates on the ballot and the questions that were on the ballot. And then they, interviewed people, and they took all the information and just pushed it off to the side. They didn't do anything with it. But what they did do instead is they randomly put people into one of two groups, and they went to one group and said, you guys are the more politically active. And then, a few days later on election day, they watched to see what would happen. And 15% more of those people showed up to vote. So, I mean, it wasn't 100%, right? We can't wave a magic wand and make everyone do what we want. But, if we could, just change a little bit of the language in our content and get a 15% uptick, it's a pretty easy win, right? So labeling can be a very powerful and effective tool for us to use as we're creating our content.
Well, we did get a question from Steve Miller, who's wondering if a phrase like "it's up to you" would improve success when inviting someone to an event, or inviting them to visit a website or fill out a form or take a survey. Because it works in the purchase kind of a situation. Does it work in some of these other scenarios as well?
Yeah, I think it absolutely would. I think anytime we're trying to get somebody to do what we want them to do, whether it's fill out a survey, whether it's attend an event, whether it's make a purchase, anytime that we can remind them that the choice is theirs, we should be able to reap the rewards of that because we're making them feel that they're coming to their own decision, they're coming to their own conclusion, they're not being pushed into something. So, we basically explain why we want them to do what we want them to do. We then ask them to do it, and then we just remind them that the choice is theirs, or it's their call, or it's up to them. And just because we're making that very salient, very top of mind, it likely translates into increased compliance, which is a fancy way of saying more people will say yes to you.
Well, it seems that Carl's father-in-law, his late father-in-law, knew some of these principles because he would start off when he wanted him to do something by saying, "You're a smart fella." And I think we've all had that. We've all been, socially engineered a little bit by our family members. So all of this said that like some of these are things that we may know even if we didn't know what the specific science was behind it. Some of these things we kind of know, but we also as marketers, we do things because it's the way that they've been done or the way we learned it in school or whatever the reason is. There are things that we do all the time that get in our way of getting the results that we want. And I was wondering if you maybe had some examples from a behavioral psychology standpoint of the things that we marketers do that actually causes the reverse of what we want to have happen.
Yes, absolutely. A couple of them spring to mind. One of them is we focus too much on benefits, and I know that's going to sound crazy because we've been taught when we study marketing that benefits sell. We get into the marketing world, we get our jobs, we emphasize benefits, and in fact they work, right? So I would never say to walk away from benefits, but what behavioral scientists have told us is that people are actually twice as motivated to avoid the pain of loss as they are to achieve the pleasure of gain. So in marketing, we double down on the pleasures of gain, right? The gains, the benefits, the advantages, all the wonderful things that will happen if you just click this link, if you just pick up the phone, if you just walk into my store, if you just go to my online store or my landing page, right? All these wonderful things will happen to you. All that all this great stuff. And again, we don't want to walk away from that, but we want to put a little well-placed loss aversion in there because people are actually more motivated to avoid the pain of loss than they are to achieve the pleasure of gain. I had a colleague who tested two different content titles. His client did ISO certifications. So if you were going to do work with this client, it was going to be because you wanted to become ISO certified, right? So they tested two lines, two content titles. They said ISO certification, will your company pass? And ISO certification, will your company fail? Now you would think that the positive one would be the thing that would work, right? Because that's why you would engage the client. That's why you would pay the money so that you could get certified and you would pass your certification. But what actually got more response was the loss aversion frame. Will your company fail? Because again, people want to avoid losses. Losses are twice as painful, and as a result, we're more motivated to avoid them. So I think one of the things that we as marketers do is we over-index on benefits and forget to inject a little bit of loss aversion. And it could be as simple as changing take advantage of to don't miss out on. Don't miss can be enough to just heighten that, like, oh wait, loss aversion. So other times it could be reminding people of the pain they can avoid if they do what we're asking them to do, or reminding them of the pain they may find themselves in if they fail to do what we're asking them to do. But that idea of loss can be a very powerful motivator, and I think in marketing we don't always use it the way we should. Another thing that I think we fall down on a little bit is not being as cognitively fluent as we want to be. So cognitive fluency is kind of a mouthful of a phrase, but basically it means that people prefer things that are easier to think about and easier to understand. And not only do they prefer them, but they judge them to be more accurate, more truthful, and this is the most important thing, they feel more confident in their ability to make a decision about them. And we're in marketing. What do we want? We want people to make decisions, right? And if people aren't confident, they're not going to make decisions. So as a result, we want to make sure that people feel confident so that they can make decisions. And yet what we do is very often we put out content that is a far cry from cognitively fluent. We jam lots and lots of information in, so people are just like overwhelmed. It's like this word salad coming at them, or we have these really thick paragraphs. So it's this wall of words that's almost impenetrable. And you look at it and you're just like, too long, don't read, right? I mean, like we make it hard just because something looks like there's too much content, or we jam in so much that, we have to think about, like, well, what is it that people want? They're looking for a solution to their problem.
Yep.
Let's focus on that, right? But instead we put, 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag, like we just kind of jam it all in there because we want to talk about it. Sometimes we forget that when something looks hard to read, people think that what they've just read about is going to be hard to do.
Yeah.
So, it's like, all right, we need white space, we need short sentences. We want to make language accessible. Again, if it's hard to read, it's going to be hard to do. So be careful about overusing, acronyms and jargon and industry buzzwords, because your audience may not be completely familiar with them, and that can be a problem, right? If you're reading something and you don't really know what someone is talking about, the acronyms are, all over the place, and we're not sure what they mean, or the language is, these really big words and run-on sentences and complicated phrasing, and it just kind of hurts your head to try to work your way through the content. You're not going to do it. You're gonna move on. And oftentimes, so we forget this, particularly in a B2B environment where we think, oh, our audience is very educated and professional, and they expect this of us. They expect us to use, thick paragraphs and big words and run-on sentences, like that's just what, and it's not, it's not what people want. Things that are easy to consume, easy to digest. There have been studies that show even among very, very highly educated audiences, people still prefer simpler language, simple to understand phrases. There was a study that I think Oppenheimer did, where they went through PhD dissertation, PhD dissertations, and they took abstracts, and they pulled every word that was 9 letters or longer and replaced it with a shorter synonym. And then they tested the original against the revised with the shorter synonyms in there. And not only did people prefer the easier to read versions, they actually rated the authors as more intelligent.
Yep.
So, again, we sometimes feel like, oh, we have to do it this way. It's this is our brand, this is our audience, and it's a big mistake. We want to make things easy for people to absorb. No one ever complained that something was too easy to consume, but people do complain when it's too difficult to consume. So I think those are a couple of mistakes that we make. The idea of not being cognitively fluent, the idea of not leveraging loss aversion when we could. Um, definitely. Definitely places where we could improve as marketers.
Well, I would be remiss if I let you leave today without addressing the big elephant in the convention center at the event, which was, of course, everyone talking about, how AI is changing the landscape for content, because you have companies who think that they can have AI write content for them, and of course they can. It's not good content. It's a lot of content, and it starts to, kind of wallpaper over everything in a level of sameness. So, with that kind of backdrop, I was wondering what your advice is for how marketers can tap into to behavioral psychology to be more human. Because the way to stand out right now, in addition to all the things that you were talking about today, are really just to make it clear that a human being created the content and that your company is full of human beings that are going to work with you for that desired outcome.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You certainly can have AI write something for you, just like you can spam people with your email. But people used to do that; they don't do it anymore, or I should say, marketers used to do it. We don't do that anymore. And the same thing with having AI generate the content. Yeah, you can do it, but you really don't want to. You're just kind of going for the average, and average is not going to be what stands out. So what we want to do is we want to lean into some of the lessons from behavioral science that help us be more human, that help us be more authentic. One of those is storytelling, right? Stories are incredibly powerful. They're engaging, they're involving, but they also have a scientific rationale for why they're so effective, and that is, when we hear a story, it activates more parts of our brains than if we're just dealing with facts and figures. If we're dealing with like facts and figures, it activates Broca's area and Wernicke's area, the two areas that are responsible for processing language. But if we're reading a story or listening to a story, other parts of our brain get activated. If we hear about someone doing a physical activity, the motor cortex gets activated. If we read about or hear about the smell of hazelnut coffee wafting under a door jamb, that would activate the olfactory cortex in our brains. But the more parts of our brain that get activated, the better we understand something and the longer we remember it. So storytelling is something that I think has a very strong behavioral science rationale for helping us sound more human and helping us create more effective content. So if we lean into our stories, because those are our stories, right? They can't necessarily be crowdsourced, right? There are stories, and so by telling our own stories, we can be more human, and the upside of that is we can be more effective with our marketing. We talked a little bit earlier about emotions, right? And adding in an appropriate amount of emotion can be very, very helpful, because people make the decisions for emotional reasons. They justify them with the rational reasons. So we want the storytelling. We want the emotion. And then there's something kind of interesting in behavioral science called the pratfall effect. And it's this idea that admitting our deficits strategically, but admitting our deficits can actually improve brand preference for us, improve the preference for our brands and our products. And it goes back to some research that a researcher out of Harvard named Aronson did. And he had this guy who was going to audition for a quiz show. And unbeknownst to everybody, he fed the guy all the answers ahead of time. So the guy goes in for his audition and he's nailing it, right? He's getting question after question after question correct. Aronson has an audio tape of the guy doing this. And at the end of the audio tape, he finishes, he's gotten almost every question correct. And then you hear him say, thank you very much. And he stands up to leave and he spills coffee on his suit. And you hear him say, oh my God, I just spilled coffee on my suit, right? So then Aronson plays the two audio tapes for people. And some people heard him just nail every question. And then that was the end of the tape. And other people heard the entire thing where he nails every question, but then he also gets up to leave and, spills coffee. And you hear him say, oh my gosh, I just spilled coffee all over myself. And people were asked to, rate this guy. What did they think of him? And everyone thought the guy was really smart, like, he's answering every question correctly. Of course he's smart. But the people who heard the longer tape where he spilled the coffee also liked him more. They rated him as a more likable guy, a more human guy. Why? Because he spilled coffee on himself. You know what I mean? Like, anybody could do that. I could do that. I couldn't answer one of those questions correctly, but I could easily spill coffee. I mean, he just seemed more relatable. He seemed more human. And so what behavioral scientists have found is there's this thing called the pratfall effect, whereas if you admit to a deficit, not like one that's going to, the success or failure of your brand is going to rest on, but some kind of a deficit, it just makes you more approachable. So, if you're a car company, if your deficit happens to be that your car explodes after 40,000 miles, that's not something to lean into. That would not be a good pratfall effect. But, if it's that your car, is smaller than most of them out on the road, or has like a slightly funny shape, well, lean into that. Think about, Volkswagen when they first came
Yep.
out. It was smaller. It looked a little funny. It didn't affect the quality of the ride that you got. So, or you think about Heinz ketchup. It's number one selling ketchup in the world, but it takes a while to get it out of the bottle. So they lean into that. And they'll run videos with the soundtrack Anticipation behind it. Or at one point they put labels on the bottles, and the label on the bottle only read upright when the bottle itself was tilted at the exact angle to make the ketchup come out more freely. So again, coming back to this idea of being more human, to say, saying it's a human here, it's not artificial intelligence. It's leaning into these things, these imperfections that we have. It's not trying to hide them. There was a study that came out that said the optimum number of stars in a rating isn't 5. It's somewhere between 4.2 and 4.7, because 5 stars, people get skeptical.
Yep.
Nobody, you can't possibly, you cannot please all the people all the time. So if you have nothing but 5 stars, I'm suspicious. But if you have, I don't know, 4.5, 4.6, it means that a lot of people like you, but not everybody does, and that I can believe, right? I'm not skeptical. So these are ways for us to be more human, right? The ratings that we have, the pratfall effect, that the shortfalls or shortcomings that we admit to, the stories that we tell, the emotion that we imbue into our communications. These are ways to set ourselves apart from AI and to make ourselves more human, more authentic, and make it more likely we'll make that connection with our audience that's so critical for the success of our communications and our content.
Well, Nancy, I think you gave folks a lot to think about and some amazing ideas so that while we're doing our 2025 planning and thinking about, what can we do differently? I feel like you have inspired so many amazing A/B tests. So thank you so much for spending an hour with us today and sharing all of this. And for folks who want more from you, where can they find you?
Well, thank you so much, Erica. The pleasure was absolutely mine. I totally enjoyed chatting with you. People can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Threads, on Twitter, X. They can find me on Facebook. Uh, they can find my book any place fine books are sold, right? Amazon, Kogan Page, Target, Barnes and Noble. And then there's my agency, HBT Marketing, hbtmktg.com. You can reach me there. We have a lot of thought leadership posted. You can find some interviews and articles to discover a little bit more about behavioral science and how you can use it. So I would love to hear from any of your audience at any point. Feel free to drop me a line or reach out or connect on social, and would love to continue the conversation, beyond today. Thank you very much.
And Nancy's going to be speaking at Marketing Profs, as am I, next week. So, and I can't believe that's next week. Next week. So, if you're going to be in Boston for this, the biggest B2B marketing shindig conference, we hope to see you there. And you should definitely make sure you get to her session early because I have seen standing room only at that event for Nancy. And so, you're going to want to get there early to get a good seat so you can take pictures.
Thank you so much. That's very sweet. But yes, so if you're going to be at Marketing Profs, you got to be at Erica's, you got to be at mine, and you're going to learn a lot. It'll be great. It'll be great to see everyone there.
All right. Well, thank you again. And everyone else, next week, even though I'll be on an airplane, I have a really fun conversation for you. So check back. Bye, everybody.